When it comes to video games, there are of course quite a few titles to choose, especially from the long history of gaming.
Indeed.
Now, gamers have the choice of spending a lot of money just to increase their collection, while others couldn't justify spending 1k for a single video game title.
No!
And this is where emulation comes into play, which of course opens up a wide array of video games. But it does beg the question to emulate or not to emulate. Definitely a topic for a future video.
Nice.
And speaking of emulation, it got me curious about this, the Super Console X Pro, which apparently can emulate up to 50,000 games. But is it worth the money? Now, just in case you're wondering, this video isn't sponsored, which is a shame, and to warn everybody at home, you're going to be getting a close look at my shovels for hands. But anyway, let's take a closer look at the Super Console X Pro. So here it is, all the way from China, the Super Console X Pro, and mine took about 2 weeks to get to the UK. Now apparently, the X Pro itself can emulate many gaming systems such as the PS1, the Game Boy Advance, as well as the Sega Dreamcast. Obviously, we'll get to the software shortly, but first, let's open the box and see what we have inside. Let's move you over there. Right, here it is, the Super Console X Pro, which, as you can see, is fairly small. Now, on the side we have two USB ports, and on the back it's a HDMI output and the all-important on and off switch. But going back to where the USB ports are, is the micro SD, which comes preloaded with all the games.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Right, I know full well that I'm going to enjoy all the different titles available within the Super Console X Pro itself, and I can guarantee there'll be some hidden gems found within. But anyway, what else did we have inside this box? Let's have a gander. Right, we have a USB expansion station, which is handy for 4-player games, a remote control, which I'll explain more about later, an instruction manual that nobody ever reads, and last but not least, are two PS2 style controllers.
I don't believe it!
Now, these controllers are very light, especially in my hands, and as for the buttons, they feel okay, and I'm certain they'll do the job. Now, the controllers themselves do need batteries in order for them to run, as they connect to the X Pro by a Bluetooth adapter. Although for your USB controller, I'm certain that'll work too. But coming back to the remote control. Now, this is why it's quite interesting. Not only is the X Pro a gaming system, but it's also an Android, where you can watch stuff like movies, or of course stream videos off the internet. By all means, check out my channel if you must.
Right.
Yes, I know I'm cheap, but I don't care. But anyway, let's get to the main part of the video that everybody wants to see.
You're goddamn right.
Okay, now I've got to admit, that was quite a good intro, and it gives you a bit of an indication as to what retro goodness awaits. But anyway, here we are, the main screen, and as you can see under the title, is a total amount of video games available. But anyway, what gaming systems do we have available on the X Pro itself? We have the Sinclair, followed by the WonderSwan, Virtua Boy, Super Graphics, and the Super Nintendo with over 1200 games. Followed by Sega CD, the 32X, the PlayStation Portable, the TurboGrafx CD, and even the Odyssey 2. Followed by Neo Geo, Nintendo Hacks, and Nintendo Entertainment System. I think the hacks are probably homebrewed games, which is going to be interesting to look at later. Then we have obviously the Neo Geo and the CD system, the Nintendo DS and Naomi, which I believe is arcade games, and of course the Nintendo 64.
Wow.
Followed by the MSX2 and the Sega Genesis, otherwise known as the Sega Mega Drive, are the endearing Master System, and the even more arcade games, which of course I'm not complaining about one bit. Next up we have in television another Sega Genesis, not quite sure why there's two, but there'll probably be some doubles as well as some region exclusives. But anyway, next up we have Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance and the original Game Boy, which is followed by the Game Gear and Game & Watch. But anyway, we have the NES Disk System, even more arcade games, and of course the Dreamcast.
Excellent!
Anyway, we also have the Commodore 64 with, now that's quite a lot of games to play with, almost 5,000 classics, which is perfect for old school gamers. But anyway, this is followed by the Atomic Swave, which is arcade games, more Atari, the Atari Lynx, a lot more Atari, and even more arcade games, which, as you know me, this is right up my street, especially with all those titles to play with. And I think this is now coming to the end, so we've got Amstrad, Commodore Amiga, and the Amiga itself. Favourites, which is self-explanatory, and here we are back to all games, over 50,000 of them. Right, now that's the list of systems available for the X Pro, and I've got to admit that's quite impressive. But more importantly, how do the games run? So let's delve back inside the Super Console X Pro. Now, is the Super Console X Pro actually worth the money? And in my opinion, I'd have to say yes. Yes, it is. Having all those games available at your fingertips is amazing, especially with those that were region exclusive.
That's pretty good.
And yes, even Zelda and GoldenEye run perfectly well on the X Pro, as does Sonic Adventure 2, which was quite surprising considering the size of those games. And if you have the opportunity to pick up an X Pro, I highly recommend you do. Oh, I have a message. Oh, it's from Phil. Nina, I want one. Nina, Phil wants a Super Console X Pro. You've been told.
Oh my.
Anyway, come back next time where I take a look at the character origins of the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next game.